everybody. We're here at Newton Hills for Storytime with Sabrina, and I'm going to read you this. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Shiloh. This is the book we're reading today. It's about a forest fairy, so I thought we would come to the forest and read. Okay? So, let me begin here. Once there was a little fairy girl with long flowing golden hair and bright blue eyes named Shiloh. Her wings were a light lavender in color, and she wore a purple dress with light peach-colored leggings almost all the time because those were her favorite colors. Little purple slippers covered her feet, and she often wore a tiny purple flower in her hair. She lived in a fertile and verdant forest with her companion Lizard, who had dark eyes and red scaly skin. During the day, she walked along the red dirt paths of the forest with Lizard as they played little games, gathered their simple food, berries for Shiloh and bugs for Lizard, and explored the expanse of the mysterious forest. Sometimes they had good times, but sometimes Lizard was mean to her and made her cry. At night, Shiloh crawled into her pretty purple flower and pulled the petals shut around her to keep herself safe and warm, while Lizard slept in a pile of leaves at the foot of her flower stem. One day, while Shiloh was amusing herself, making bubbles and snowflakes with the water that she could make come out of her hands at will, Lizard ate all the petals of her flower, down to small rags. When Shiloh saw it, she cried out, "Lizard, how could you do this to me?" "What?" Lizard replied. "I was hungry." "It's not like there's not plenty of other greenery for you to feed on," Shiloh moaned. "That's why you have your own personal flower patch with your own flowers to eat." "I like your flower better. It was handier at the time," Lizard said uncaringly. Overwhelmed with despairing sadness, Shiloh flew away and found a hollow place in a tree where she could hide, and cried for the loss of her warm, safe flower. That night she shivered with cold as she slept fitfully in the hard hollow of the tree. Lizard pushed his pile of leaves up next to the tree she had taken refuge in, and slept in the pile as always. The next day Shiloh flew around and laboriously collected some flower petals to put in the hollow of the tree she had slept in the night before. Lizard followed her on the ground, complaining that she was too far away, and he wanted her to come play with him as before. Finally, feeling sorry for Lizard, Shiloh came down to play with him, although she felt betrayed by him and wanted to run and hide from him forever. Things went on as before for a while, except that Shiloh slept amongst petals in the hollow of the tree, and she didn't trust Lizard as much as before. This is kind of slippery. Finally, feeling sorry for Lizard, Shiloh... Oh, sorry, I already read that. Lizard told her that she didn't deserve or need her own flower anyway. Every few days, the petals that Shiloh was using for bedding got thin and died, and she had to collect new ones. Then Lizard started complaining that her bed was better than his, and that wasn't right, because he deserved the best of everything. He demanded that she carry him up to the hollow and that she should sleep in the leaves at the bottom of the tree. Using every last ounce of strength she had, she began carrying him up to the hollow at night, collapsing exhausted in the leaves afterwards, too tired to care that there might be danger to her in the nocturnal forest if she slept down there. It didn't take too many days before Shiloh was so tired that she had to run away and hide from Lizard because she couldn't take his demands anymore. But alas, it wasn't as easy as she had hoped. Lizard followed her with empty promises that he would find her another flower of her own, and he wouldn't demand her to carry him anymore. So Shiloh came down and walked with Lizard again. It turned out there was no new flower for her, and after a bit he started demanding to be carried up into the hollow again. Well, even more exhausted, Shiloh ran away again. What are you getting back there? This time, Lizard did not try to get her to come back. He just followed her around, telling her how worthless she was, and how silly she was to run away, and various other manipulative and mean things. Sorry, this doesn't go with the story, but finally one night, while Lizard slept, Shiloh created a huge wall of ice to keep Lizard on his own side of the forest, so that she could go on with her life and hopefully find another flower of her own and live in peace. Unfortunately, although he could no longer follow her, he could still see her from time to time, and she could still hear his rude comments every so often. But at least she was able to find a new flower of her own that she could tuck in around herself at night and feel safe and warm again. Chapter 2. Enjoying the safe, warm feeling she got while inside her flower, and the fact that Lizard couldn't see her in there, she began spending more and more time inside her flower, with the petals pulled in around her, amusing herself with her little water creations, until finally she spent almost all of her time in her flower, coming out only to get food. Although she felt very lonely, she was so happy to be able to live in peace without anyone around to destroy her possessions and drain her energy. One day, as she was out gathering food for the day, she met a green, scaly-skinned chap with intriguing brown eyes named Chameleon. On seeing him coming towards her, she jumped into the air and fluttered at a safe distance as she cautiously answered his greeting. After exchanging a few words of little consequence, Chameleon lumbered off about his own business, while Shiloh flew off to her flower with her raspberry. From time to time after that, Shiloh encountered Chameleon on her quest for food, and they would share stories and talk about their day, until Shiloh began to feel fairly safe around him. Once Shiloh shyly made a snowflake while Chameleon watched. Smiling, Chameleon showed his enjoyment and appreciation of her creativity. Eventually, they walked together and played together in the forest. When Lizard saw her and made rude comments to her, Chameleon would scowl at him, then Lizard would slink behind a tree on his side of the forest. Eventually, Chameleon won Shiloh's trust so much that she invited him to come sleep in the leaves under her flower because she missed him when they were apart. Chameleon was never mean to Shiloh, and he always helped her whenever she needed help. Because of the way Chameleon treated her, Shiloh began to suspect that she had worth and value after all, and that all the mean things Lizard had said to her were a lie. One morning, as Shiloh lay sleepily in her flower, just waking up, she heard low, soft voices down below. Without looking, she could tell that one voice was Chameleon's, but who could the other voice belong to, she wondered. Opening a little crack between two petals so she could peek down, she saw the fluffy light brown hair of the elven prince, who stood below her talking to Chameleon. As if sensing her curious eyes upon him, he looked up into her little crack and smiled at her. "Why don't you come down and join the party, Shiloh?" the prince invited. Giggling softly and blushing, Shiloh opened her flower and fluttered down to join their conversation. It never ceased to surprise her that the elven prince knew her name and was so aware of her any time he was around, just like now when he knew she was peeking out at him. Okay?
Can we do this another day?
No, we're gonna finish this, but we will just stand here for a minute. All right. Can you get to a place here? Shiloh, I could really use your help right now if you're willing, the elven prince told her, his warm, lively green eyes looking into hers. You need my help? Shiloh asked, surprised. What could I possibly do for you? Well, you know that little thing you do with the water in your hands, the prince said to her. Looking at her hands, Shiloh made a few bubbles. Well, yeah, she said. Have you ever tried to make an ice picture or statue with that? He continued. Well, no, but I could try, Shiloh answered. What do you want an ice picture for? The prince sighed. You see, the creatures of the forest, like yourself, for example, forget how I rescued them from the old dragon a few years ago. Do you remember that? Uh-huh, Shiloh replied. The problem is that when they forget what I have done for them, they also forget what I want to do for them. Because they don't keep my care for them and my power that I displayed rescuing them from the dragon in the front of their minds, when they have new troubles, they don't think to ask for my help. They wander off trying to figure it out on their own, or asking for help from other creatures, not all of whom have their best interests in mind, see? The prince explained patiently. Uh-huh, Shiloh said, her eyes fastened to his, listening intently and trying to understand what this had to do with her water play. Well, it breaks my heart to see them wandering off and getting hurt even more when I have better answers and solutions for them if they would just come to me, the prince went on. And so I was wondering if you would make some ice scenes and statues to place throughout the forest to remind them how much I want to be a part of their lives and help them with everything that they face. Oh, said Shiloh. She paused. Do you really think that my work could ever be good enough for that? I know it will be, the prince answered. It was for this very purpose that I gave you that gift. He paused to let his words sink in. Then, reaching into the leather pouch that he wore on his hip, he pulled out a delicate golden crown and set it on her head. This crown is to help you remember that I have put beautiful and effective creative thoughts and ideas in your mind to help you with this task. After another short pause while Shiloh processed what he had just said and done, the prince again reached into his pouch and pulled out a beautiful necklace, which he fastened around her neck. The colorful beads and golden strands hung down and covered much of her chest. This necklace is to remind you that from the feelings and experiences that you hold in your heart, you can create beautiful things that will enrich the lives of others when you share them. After another pause, the prince spoke again. One last thing I want to give you right now, he said, as he pulled a golden engraving tool inlaid with purple jewels, set in beautiful designs from his pouch. This is to help you in your work of creating ice pictures, and it will remind you that your work is important to me. It means a lot to me that you are willing to help me with the problem that weighs so heavy on my heart right now. One day, I will reward you richly for it. With that, he smiled at her, nodded his goodbyes to both her and the chameleon, and took a backward step into the other dimension out of their sight. Shiloh and chameleon looked at each other. Wow, was all Shiloh could say. If you need any help with anything, let me know, Chameleon said, over his shoulder as he lumbered off about his business. He must have sensed that Shiloh needed some time alone to process all that the prince had told her. Fluttering off to a hollow space in a tree, Shiloh sat and practiced making ice sculptures. She made an ice chameleon and an ice elven prince. Then she made an ice version of herself, wearing the new crown and necklace, and holding the engraving tool in her hand. And she thought about all that the prince had told her and how he had rescued them all from the old dragon. Chapter 3. It had all started when the very first fairies lived in the forest. While going about their business, gathering food and playing with the gifts that the Elven King had given them, they sometimes passed a giant cage, in which sat a miserable-looking old red dragon. On one occasion, seeing them pause to look at him, the wily dragon spoke to them. If you let me out of this cage, I will give you better gifts than those pathetic ones, he said with a sneer and a scornful glance at what they had. Turning over the new concept in their minds that there might be something better than what they had, the fairies looked at their gifts and looked at the dragon. Finally, the girl fairy took the key that the king had entrusted to the boy and used it to let the dragon out. The boy didn't stop her. Bursting suddenly out of the cage, the dragon's evil laughter filled the air as he snatched away the food and the gifts that the first fairies held in their hands. As he flew away, he breathed fire on the berry bushes and the flowers and turned them to blackened, barren stems. All around them, their beautiful forest turned black, with no food or comfortable resting places to be found. While the girl burst into tears, the boy hung his head in shame, knowing he had let the king down. After that, they wandered around, trying to dig up roots to eat, sleeping in hard, hollow places in the trees. When things would start to grow back, the dragon would swoop in, breathing fire on everything again. In this way, the dragon oppressively ruled the forest, as the fairies multiplied in their barren, harsh world. Then one day the elven prince showed up, when things were starting to turn green again, and they all knew that the dragon would soon appear to destroy everything. As the dragon flew into sight over the horizon, the elven prince jumped into the air to meet him. Watching from the ground, Shiloh and the others wondered if the dragon would even notice him. Rushing towards the dragon, the elven prince reached his hand out in a stopping gesture. When the dragon reached a place several feet away from the prince, suddenly it looked as though he had hit a huge, strong wall, because he stopped with a huge impact and fell to the ground. Dropping to the ground to confront the dragon, the prince walked up to him. Arms crossed on his chest, the prince waited for the dragon to gather his wits about him. Finally, the dragon pulled himself up to his full height, roaring. In a loud voice, the prince told the dragon, "You have oppressed all who live in this forest long enough. If you want to destroy their forest again, you will have to go through me." Laughing his enormous evil laugh, the dragon swiped at the prince with a sharp-clawed paw. The crowd of watching fairies gasped as they saw a huge streak of blood appear across the prince's whole body, as the force of the dragon's paw flung him out of the way. Time stood still for a moment as the dragon and the crowd of fairies watched the prince's body lie motionless on the ground. After a few moments, the dragon decided the prince was dead. Stirring himself, he rose up, intending to wipe out everything in the forest as always. To be continued. Look for part 2.